Hi, Laurie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thank you. So happy to be here with you.
Well, after all that we've exchanged emails and stuff, and your book sounds so interesting, I'm happy to have you here as well. I'm real privileged because you have done some amazing things. I mean, you've met some famous people, and even in our pre-chat, you told me that you saw the Beatles play live, and not too many people could say that.
Absolutely. Of course, I was a little kid, so I kind of barely remember, except for a lot of screaming and girls standing up in front of me. But still, it was so exciting and so
Wonderful,
happy to be able to
wonderful,
on that.
wonderful. Now we're here to talk about a book that you call Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper.
Well, actually, the title is Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. And it's my memoir, the story of my early rock-related life and career wrapped around what tragically turned out to be John Lennon's last day on the planet, December 8th, 1980, which I was unbelievably able to spend a major part of with him and Yoko at the Dakota, and I felt like I'd begun to make lifetime friends. But sadly, of course, that couldn't happen because John was shot and killed mere hours after our get together. Ugh. And I was accosted by the asshole who ended up as his assassinator, which made me incredibly guilty as well.
Okay, that must really have done a number on your head, I could just imagine. I remember that day and I woke up in the morning and I turned, the alarm clock went off and I heard the news and it was shocking.
I can imagine.
Well, we will talk about this book in detail. Before we start, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, where you come from, and how you got to the point where you decided to write this book?
Well, I'm a Los Angeles raised SoCal gal. And even though I've lived all over the country, well, actually all over the world since then, I'm back in LA now because I love this city and the people here and my house here. It's great. And it was incredible growing up here because I was raised in a very dysfunctional family by a mother who didn't want to have me or have any child. She only had me, but her husband left her when he found out she was pregnant. So she was not happy to have me. And so therefore, I was not treated very well. So from a very early age, as a toddler, actually, I got into music to take me away from family life. And my grandparents gave me a great little radio with earplugs, and my transistor and I spent the night together every night and most of the days. And so from that very early age, I listened to AM radio and started out with everyone from Elvis Presley to Fats Domino to Chuck Berry, you name it, and then the Beach Boys, and then finally the Beatles when they came up in the early 60s. It was just amazing. And radio filled my life ever since. I went eventually from AM to FM listening in high school, which changed my life as well. And eventually got into radio for my career and got on the air as a newscaster and creator of rock and roll radio specials for RKO Radio and other places eventually 2 years after that. So it's been an amazing lifetime with music and radio.
Oh, we have some similar backgrounds there. Music, of course,
Absolutely.
being the main one.
Well, mine is all in my book. It's part of my story because radio changed my life and got me into my career because when I was in high school, this story is in my book, I won tickets to the Rolling Stones Nicaragua benefit at the Forum here in LA. And when we went to the radio station to pick up the tickets for that night, they were front row seats. I thought I was just going to be walking into the office and picking them up at KMET FM, but they said, no, the disc jockey wants you in his DJ booth and to be on the air with him for a minute. And I said, yes, great. So I went in with B. Mitchell Reed and he asked me my name and my age and where I went to high school, that sort of thing. And I told him, and he said, well, great. And with your voice, you should be on the air. And I said, what? And he said, yes, it should be your career. So I was so excited. So as thrilling as it was to win the tickets and to see the Rolling Stones for the first time, and it was an amazing concert, and there's pictures from it in my book as well. It was the direction that I took my career eventually. And that's why I ended up at KFRC San Francisco and other radio stations.
Hmm. Yeah, there are some really interesting pictures in your book. I imagine some of them you took and some other ones other people took. Did you get into photography at all?
Well, back then, actually, other people took them because we didn't have the phones that took the pictures.
Sure.
So I had to give them my cameras, or they used their cameras, and they took pictures of me with artists. And then sometimes, there just weren't cameras available. So unfortunately, like I didn't get pictures of me with some of my incredible interviews, like the Ramones or Talking Heads, which still saddens me a lot.
Mm.
But I have amazing photographs of me with John and Yoko, an amazing photograph of me with Paul McCartney and his wife Linda in London.
Now, these interviews that you had, you mentioned Ramones and Talking Heads. Were they done through the radio show or your own personal interests?
Well, I was definitely personally interested because I was a punk rocker already at the time. And even though I was at the time writing and co-producing the RKO Presents the Beatles, which was the longest Beatles radio special ever created in the United States, I was also wanting to do a shorter radio special on punk rock and new wave. So when the Ramones came to town and Talking Heads came to town, I interviewed both of them. I interviewed lots of punk rocker and new wavers based in San Francisco and LA. They came to the radio station, did them all in the studio. So it was thrilling.
So do you play any musical instruments yourself?
No, I never did. I was not a musician. I was just an appreciator of music.
Okay, cool. How big is your book? How long is it?
It's about 200 and something pages, 230, something like that, I believe.
You got a copy of it there with you?
I do,
Let's take a look.
right here.
Okay.
It's got everything in it that's really cool, including the autograph from John and Yoko that they gave me for their book, for Yoko's book, Grapefruit, that John also did the introduction for. And so that's really exciting. I gave it to people so they could say, oh, yes, now I have a John Lennon autograph myself.
Cool.
So hopefully everybody will get it and read it. You can get it everywhere from most bookstores to because they have it in stock, to everywhere online from Amazon to Walmart.
Okay. What made you call the book a rock and roll name dropper? And of course, all the other words after that, but the word name dropper, how did you figure that?
Because that's what I am. I'm always talking about rock stars that I met and interviewed and hung out with and got to see all the time in concerts that were so important to my life, the major things in my life. So, yes, that's my book, Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper.
Cool.
That's
Really
me.
cool. I like the name. I like the title. It's pretty good. Says it all. And I guess on the cover of the book, that's you on the left side.
Yes, that's me on the left, Yoko on the right, and John Lennon in the middle. And actually, I have the original photo, which is a color photo, but on the book, they wanted to do black and white so they could put the title of the book in color.
Now, about that sad story about you interviewing John Lennon, and you're saying that that was the last interview that you know of him, and then you're the one who conducted it. When exactly did that take place in relation to December 8th?
It took place from the midday, mid-morning, about 11-ish to all the way till after 4 p.m.
My goodness, on that day?
Yes. And then the interview was incredible. And we took a lot of time to take photos with me and the rest of my RKO team and to talk about we were going to be friends and get together in a couple weeks in San Francisco and go have dinner. We were going to go to Yoko's favorite Japanese restaurant for sushi, which excited me because, of course, I love John and Yoko and I loved sushi. So
Yeah.
it was going to be a major event. And sad to say, of course,
Yeah.
that never happened. But at the end of the interview, Yoko found out that her limo driver wasn't able to take her and John to the recording studio where they had an appointment and we're going to spend time there. So she asked if we could take her, and the guys were going to take our limo to the airport because they were going back to the West Coast that night. I was staying there for the night to have dinner with an old friend of mine. And so they said, sure, we'll take you. So the time together ended because they had to go to the record studio, and the guys had to get to the airport. So we all walked out and hugged and said goodbye and everything. And the guys took them. And then I was standing there on my own on the sidewalk there were a number of other people. And this guy just kept bugging me. Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? And he wouldn't leave me alone. And he kept following me down the sidewalk as I was off to my friend's office, who I was going to have dinner with. And I turned around and told him to get lost. And he kept saying it over again. Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? And that's one reason I feel guilty, is because I should have reported him to the security people at the Dakota, and I didn't. And I didn't look at him closely enough to see that he had a gun in his pocket, which would turn out to be the one that he ended up shooting John with in several hours.
Right.
So finally, I acted as though I was going to smack him, even though I didn't really touch him. And I left, and he finally stopped following me, and I went off to my friend's office. But that was my last time at the Dakota that day. And of course, when John and Yoko came back from the recording studio later that evening, he was there and he shot John.
In your interview with John, did you guys discuss that they just wanted to be like regular people walking around and not be bothered by it?
That was exactly obvious because he wanted to, for example, go out to lunch with Yoko and
Yeah,
travel with his kid and just do things. He was definitely interested in being a regular fella.
I know. I know. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful sentiment, and I'm really sad that that didn't work out. Now, what else is in this book besides John Lennon? Do you cover other rock stars and, name dropping other artists as well?
Yes, I love to name drop. As I mentioned, the Ramones and Talking Heads and George Harrison, who's definitely quoted. They're all quoted quite a bit. And George Martin, their producer, which
Oh,
was a
great.
wonderful interview at the studio after his book came out, All You Need Is Ears,
Mm-hmm.
uh, about his life and his time with the Beatles. And that was thrilling. And he was so complimentary to me about the Beatles special that I'd written and co-produced. RKO Presents the Beatles. And then it started out at 14 hours. And then we expanded it to 17 hours. And we got to change the title to the one that I had originally come up with, which is The Beatles from Liverpool to Legend. And it got even more famous at 17 hours and played all over the world. People from
Wow.
Australia tell me, oh, yeah, I remember listening to it. It was great. I recorded it off the radio. So
Great.
that's exciting for me to hear.
Yeah. When did you release this book?
My publisher released it December 8th, 2023, which was the 43rd anniversary of John Lennon's passing and our interview, which was, of course, his last interview. But I was going to tell you also that, of course, I interviewed Paul McCartney and Linda, his wife, in London the year before, in 1979, following the release of their latest Wings album, Back to the Egg, which was actually their last one. And that was a wonderful interview to hang out with Paul and Linda and the rest of their band, including the late great Denny Lane, and so many others I've interviewed, everyone from David Bowie to Mick Jagger to, gosh, I just have such a long list. I can't even
Mm.
think of all the names, you know. It's just
Yeah.
it's been an amazing interview life.
Yeah. How about Lou Reed?
Uh, I didn't interview Lou Reed, but I got to work with him and spend the day with him in the recording studio
Mhm.
because that was one of my very first um, production jobs. The shooting of his music video with Sam Moore of Soul Man for
Yeah.
that movie that came out in 1986. So that was years later. So I got to spend the day in the recording studio with Lou Reed, who'd been one of my heroes since high school. It was just amazing. And Sam Moore was really cool too. So I loved it.
Yeah. What are you doing now? Are you still working?
Um, well, if you count promoting my book, then
Okay.
yes, I'm working full-time plus. But no, I'm not doing TV production or video production anymore because I'm basically still recovering from when COVID happened, which basically was the end of all my TV production work. So that's what it enabled me to start writing my book.
Hmm.
Finally, I wasn't working every day of the week, you know, weekends too, and nights practically. So I had time to finally write my book, which took me, you know, almost 2 years, along with getting a publisher and
Yeah.
putting it together and going through the editing and everything and coming up with the pictures and, you know, showing it to people, seeing what they think and getting great celebrity comments. And for example, one of my wonderful interviews, Talking Heads, was with all of the band members, and Chris France, the drummer, um, read my book because he had just come out with the book himself, and he really liked it. And there's a comment from him, a very complimentary one, on the back cover of the book. That's something that basically I've been doing ever since. Although, to be very honest, I did take one other job, no, two, three other jobs in 2021 and 22. But since then, I've been working on promoting my book and getting that going.
For sure. Well, you've certainly have had a very colorful and dynamic life. I'm surprised you haven't written more books. Do you have any ideas for any future books and keep going in this direction?
Well, my book doesn't take me through my life, my entire life. It stops basically around the 80s. So there's lots more I could write in terms of memoir, but the hard thing about writing a book is that, like that, is that unless you keep a daily diary and written down what goes on in your life every day of the year, which unfortunately I never ever did, lifetime memories can be really hard to hang on to,
Yeah.
especially the older you get.
Yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
sometimes
Sure.
it's like names and things like that just escape from me.
Yeah.
So, plus, if you're not a celebrity, which I'm not, getting a literary agent and a publisher eventually interested in your memoir can also be extremely difficult unless you're willing to self-publish, which I'm absolutely not, never have been.
All right.
So lucky for me, I was able to make it work and find an agent and find a traditional independent publishing company that was super eager to read my self-edited first draft of my memoir and
Mhm.
send me a contract right away and publish my book.
Why do you call it a memoir?
It's definitely a memoir because it talks about everything from my growing up and the part that music played in my life
Yeah.
and listening to a transistor radio. And also, every chapter in my book, all 18, are named after a favorite song of mine.
Right.
So even my life story about going to high school, rock and roll high school,
Yeah, yeah.
and going to college, also named after a favorite song of mine. And I can tell you some of the song titles that are
Cool.
chapter
Let's
titles
do
in
that.
the book. Um, for example, so many of my favorites. Um, Dude Looks Like a Lady. That's the basic first chapter about my college life, because my boyfriend was the dude looks like a lady.
Okay, cool.
Going back to Alcatraz, another of my favorite song titles, was about moving to the Bay Area near Alcatraz
Yeah.
Island. And Love in an Elevator is another chapter in my book. And another favorite song of mine, California Dreamin', about coming back to California. And like I said, there's 18 of these favorite songs. And my last chapter is called Paperback Writer, which, as you can imagine, thanks to Paul McCartney, helped me write my book.
Sure.
So
Yeah, cool.
definitely important to me.
Wow, sounds like a really fun book. So you're not self-published. You work with a hybrid publisher, or how did that work out for you?
An independent traditional publisher.
Okay, good. Yeah. And was that hard getting get them to pay attention to you? I mean, you did briefly talk about it, but there's a lot of authors that I talk with here, and some of them would really wish to find an independent publisher to do it, but they do self-publishing, and I understand that that's a tricky business for most people. But you somehow got beyond that. How was that experience for you?
Some people are very good at self-publishing, but it's nothing I ever wanted to try. So I got a literary agent right off the bat,
Okay.
right around the first year of COVID. And he was excited, but then he said, "Uh-oh, Laurie, I have to be honest with you. They're only looking for celebrity memoirs now, the major publishers. So I think this is something you're going to have to either wait to do or reconsider." And so I was so upset about that that I said, "You know what? I'm not going to use you as my literary agent." And I went about finding an independent traditional publisher myself, and I sent it to several of them, and so many were interested. And I went with the one that I felt with had the most interest and seemed to really be excited about it, and was able to put it out the fastest and give me the best uh, source for my book. And although they weren't going to be doing publicity or much book promotion, they still were going to help me out with it. So I went with them, and I went with Fayetteville Mafia Press. They've been very helpful to me.
How long did it take for you to secure a contract, though?
Well, not very long at all.
Hmm.
From the minute they read my book, they said, "Can we send you a contract?"
Hmm.
So they immediately did. And I didn't sign it right away. I went through Authors Guild, and I had the literary attorney there read it and tell me what he thought, and he suggested a couple corrections. So I did those. They weren't very important, but we did that. And then when it was ready, then I signed it, and then we went forward, and I finished up my book, and they started editing it, and we went back and forth, and I added stuff, and then they suggested taking some stuff out. And so, finally it happened.
Oh, excellent. I'm really happy for you. Is there a audio version of this book?
Oh yes, after the paperback was released, not released officially, but it came out early. They actually released it a couple months earlier. They made it available online at their publisher's website and everything, and Amazon. They said to me, "It's time for you to think about an audiobook." And I thought, well, with my voice, it's going to be easy because I can do it myself. But it's actually very hard to record your own audiobook. But I do have a recording studio. So I had the producer produce me recording it. And the cool thing about my audiobook is so many of the interview bites that are featured in my book are actually featured as the original bites from the rock stars in the audiobook. So you get to hear John Lennon, you get to hear Paul McCartney, you get to hear Ramones. So it's very exciting. The audiobook has gotten a lot of good response.
For sure. And were you responsible in archiving these interviews, or did you have to go back and find them somehow?
Well, many of them I have because I have the original tapes, but they were done so long ago that a lot of them, of course, were on reel to reel.
Yes, of
So
course.
they all have to be transferred because not many people have a reel to reel machine anymore. So we had to get one and do that. And my husband is a techie, so he was able to help me with all that. Thank
Yeah,
goodness. And I still have a lot of these specials that I did too. Some of them, for example, the Beatles special, I still have on reel to reel. Here's the one of the original hours of it. RKO Presents the Beatles. When it came out, this was a 14-hour version. When it came out as the 17-hour version, the Beatles from Liverpool to Legend, they put it out on albums, vinyl albums. But this is on a reel to reel, so it's a lot different for me to have now. But I also have it a digital version as well. So it's
good.
very exciting for me to still
Excellent.
listen to.
Wow. So cool. So cool.
Thank you.
Now, where could people find this book? Is it Amazon, Barnes and Noble? Where would they go?
Everywhere from Amazon online, Target online, um, Walmart online. If they go to my website, you can see a lot of the online places, including my publisher's website, as well as a lot of the in-stock stores, Barnes and Noble, or if you're in, for example, the UK, it's in Waterstone's bookstore, especially in Liverpool, where it's in stock in two sections, the Beatles section and the general entertainment section. And it's in so many stores all across the country, as well as on all of their websites as well. So people can get it in plenty of places.
Excellent.
And a lot of them can find it in local libraries too. In Los Angeles, it's in the library. And
Good.
so you can get it lots of places.
Yeah. Do you do any readings from your book, public readings?
I do live readings, and on the website, there's a couple of them where I read my first chapters and others. So you can go there, and there's podcasts and book reviews and a lot of background about the book and quotes and everything too.
I think I'm going to enjoy asking this next question. How are sales for you?
Well, so far they've been pretty darn good.
I
And
imagine.
recently on Amazon, which has thousands of Beatles related books, I was in the top 100, number 50. I've dropped out a little because everything changes hour to hour with them in terms of sales.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping is that everybody who reads my book will please leave me a 5-star online review, Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes and Noble, wherever, because not only will it help promote my book, but it'll let me see what people love about it. And
Yeah.
they've all been 5 stars pretty much. So I'm hoping everyone will.
So this is the one book that you had inside of you. People say everyone has a book inside of them. Is this the one that they were talking about when they were talking about you?
Absolutely. Because the minute they would hear that I had done John Lennon's last interview with my RKO team, it was like, when are you going to write your book?
Yeah.
And it took me 40 years basically to start writing it
Yeah.
because I was busy, I was guilty, and finally I was able to.
Yeah.
And people are excited.
Well, even though you don't self-publish, was the self-publishing industry a motivator for you to think, maybe now's the time I'm going to write a book? I'm not going to self-publish, but I'm getting the vibes that this is the time to write a book.
Well, I knew a number of people who had self published,
Yeah.
and some had success with it and some did not. So, like you said, I never wanted to self publish. But yes, it made me think that definitely people would read my book. It's the story of my rock radio related life. And it's very exciting because so many people my age, younger and older, have had a similar background listening to radio from being very young all the way to now and still go to lots of rock concerts. So they will basically not help but relate to my book. and my lifestyle. And it's just very exciting for people to read rock star interview quotes and see what John Lennon thought about this and Paul McCartney thought about that, and read about exciting things like things I got to do with Paul and Linda. For example, smoke pot with them, which is crazy, and getting kissed by Paul McCartney is
Wow.
just amazing. So things like that people want to hear about, people want to know about, people want to imagine maybe that they'd have the opportunity too.
Mm,
So I think people will love reading about my book and hearing about how I made it out through being raised by a dysfunctional family, and how I basically was successful in radio and was a successful newscaster as well. And I think it will be thrilling for so many people.
I
So
think
it's
so too.
definitely the thing to do, is to get for yourself and get for friends, which so many people did. And I'm happy to be able to autograph it for people too.
Okay. Laurie, this is one of the most fun interviews I've had in a long time. Some ones are special. This is a special one. I really like it.
Thank you. It's been fun for me too. I've had a
Okay.
great time talking with you.
All right, you too. Well, you take care and all the best to you in the future.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, and if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then I invite you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment if you wish. And if you are an author, I would sure love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing, and remember to be kind to one another.